Okay, this is the third time I'm re-recording this intro. See if I get it right this time. So this video is going to be on the very first computer I had ever purchased. With my own money, saved up, had a job. This was back in 91 or 92, so I'm a little bit late to the game compared to some of you that have been playing around with computers since, the 70s and early 80s, or even late 80s for that matter. But this was my computer that I can call my own. And I hot rodded it like, most guys would do to their cars. I didn't have a car at the time, couldn't afford one. That was way out of my price range, not even a used car. Not the point, though, of the video. So I bought this computer through Computer Shopper magazine, through a company called True Data Products Incorporated, I think. They were some place down in somewhere in the southern U.S., I want to say Mississippi or something. And I bought this computer, and it was absolutely bare bones. It had nothing with it, which was perfect because it gave me an opportunity to upgrade it, learn, and play around. So this was a 486 SX 25 megahertz system. The motherboard came with 2 megs of RAM soldered on with 4 30-pin SIM slots for expandability. It had no level 2 cache, but there were sockets to add L2 cache later. It had no sound card, no CD-ROM drive, nothing. It did come with a 1.44 meg floppy drive. I paid a little extra to buy a 1.2 meg floppy drive. I wanted the dual floppy capabilities. I threw in $50, and I don't even know if that was enough money for the time. They never contacted me. They just added it for me and shipped it. I didn't even know what I was getting. It just said it was a refurbished computer, and when I got it, there was no branding on it whatsoever. It wasn't until I looked inside the case and saw on the silk screen on the motherboard that it was a Packard Bell motherboard or Packard Bell computer. I believe this model was known as the PB401T, if I'm not mistaken. And, when you started it up, the BIOS also said Packard Bell as well, so that gave it away right there. But it was a great system to play around with, and I really enjoyed it, and so I want to share it with you guys today. Let's take a look at the case first, the outside, and then we'll take a look at the inside. I'm not going to take it all apart. Sorry, I like you guys, but I'm just not going to do that. That's way too much. I don't have enough time on my hands to be able to be taking computers absolutely apart and putting them back together. So you're just going to have to deal with the camera shots on the inside. But hold on, let's look at the outside first. Okay, so this is the computer. I apologize about my messy basement with everything all over. You guys get to have a tour of it. But this is the case. It's a very beige, unassuming, standard early 90s case. I really liked this cover here. Unfortunately, I broke it long ago, and there's a bottom piece that's supposed to hold this in, and it broke. So it just kind of rests in there now. And here is the floppy drives that I mentioned. I have since obviously added a CD-ROM drive. I remember the CD-ROM craze of the early 90s and buying a 2X and a 4X CD. I don't think I actually bought the 2X, but I know I bought the 4X and stuck it in here. And then when the 6Xs came out, or the hex speeds, I'm like, ooh, faster speed, I gotta have it. You gotta hot rod your system. Probably would have been wiser, instead of going from a 4X to a 6X and spending the money on it, probably would have been wiser to put that money towards a newer computer for later. But hot rodding is fun, and so that's what I did. In fact, I actually skipped right over the Pentium series when I went from this computer to my next computer. I went right from this 486 directly into a Pentium 2 300, and I thought I was, blazing fast. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a look on the inside. The system is powered on because the internal battery is dead, And even if I plug in an external battery, for which there is a header for, it still loses its time, and I have replaced the external battery twice. So I don't know if I just keep getting dead batteries or if there's something wrong with the circuitry on the motherboard. So I just leave it powered up. It doesn't consume a whole heck of a lot of electricity. I suppose I could power it off, but it's powered on right now. Maybe I'll power it off. But let's take a look on the inside. Real quick, one thing I like is the fact that, like a lot of other computer manufacturers, on the inside of the case, this is the top side of the case, on the inside, it actually shows you a little diagram and layout. So you have your documentation right there for the motherboard, for all the jumper settings and everything. Really neat. Okay, so this is the inside of the computer. You know, there's your power supply right there with the real-time clock battery plugged in, and it doesn't work. I've got a Varta back there that I have not disconnected. Fortunately, it has not exploded or caused any damage, though it is right next to the power supply connectors. It looks like Packard Bell used to actually have like a modem card right here. You probably can't see that very well. I need more light in here. But I know on other Packard Bell systems, that's what they would do. There would be a header for a modem card, and you would plug it into the motherboard and put it out the back of the case there. Now, moving on up, we actually have a little better lighting. You have 5 ISA slots on this particular system. Your video chip is back there, and here's the 2 megs of solid RAM. Right, if I can get right down there. Here is the 430-pin SIM slots. It is a little dusty. Sorry about that. Sorry for those that don't like all the extra dust. There is the cache chips. There is the upgrade processor, and there is the regular processor right beneath it, the 486SX25. I quickly learned that I could overclock it by changing the bus settings from 25 megahertz to 33 megahertz. I didn't learn that until a few CPU upgrades later. I did upgrade this initially from an SX25 to a DX250, and I thought that was great. It was super fast. And then the DX4s came out later, and I bought an Intel DX475, and that was even more speed. I was really impressed. It really made Windows 3.1 fly. And that was right around the time I decided to experiment. I heard about the DX4 100, but it needed a 33 megahertz bus, and I had read that if you changed the jumpers on your motherboard, you could probably get 33 megahertz operation. So I did it, and I thought it was risky. I thought maybe some peripherals wouldn't work. It's been working at 33 megahertz for over 30 years now, and it works great. So I was able to upgrade to a DX4 100. So that's 3 upgrade processors that I put into the system, spending all that money on, before finally getting a Kingston turbo chip, which is what's in there now. And that has the AMD Am5x86. It's really a 486 chip, but it's running at 133 megahertz. Saw very little speed boost going from the Intel DX4 100 to the 133. In fact, I swear some operations seemed a little bit slower. I can't quantify that, but it was a little weird to me. And you may not be able to see the sticker, but back there you can see that it had an onboard OTI VGA graphics chip. Can you see that right to the right of the processor there? That graphics chip was obviously not great, but it was usable under DOS. Even had a VBE or VISA BIOS extensions TSR for it, so I can do VISA stuff. But it only had 256 kilobytes of RAM. I found some DRAM chips, which I wasn't even sure if they would work. They were DRAM chips for a standard XT clone, I think I pulled them from, and I put them into the DRAM sockets for the video chip, and I was able to upgrade it to a full 512 kilobytes of RAM for the onboard video. And then came the big upgrade. I went ahead and bought an ATI Mach 64. I think it was called a Graphics Expression at the time. It's Mach 64 ISA based with a full 2 megabytes of video RAM. And I'm like, ooh, I can have millions of colors now. And I thought that the extra RAM would be used for buffering. Little did I know that back then, most video games didn't use extra RAM for buffering. The extra RAM was typically used for high resolutions and more colors. It wasn't until a little bit later that video games started using the extra video RAM as video buffer space to buffer up the video. So the RAM went largely unused in my system. But I did really enjoy being able to use 800 by 600 or even 1024 by 768 in 16 million colors. But little to my dismay, that the many games actually wouldn't work if you were in 16 million colors mode, or even 16-bit color mode. You had to run in 256 colors for a few different games. So I was constantly having to switch video modes, and it was so frustrating. But this is the ATI graphics card here. I believe I spent $200 on that, and at the time I thought that was an insane amount of money to spend on a graphics card. And now here we are, 40 years later, and we're spending $2,000 on graphics cards. Yeah. And then of course I do have a network card in here. Didn't have this originally. I did end up buying several modems as I hot rodded my system. Started off with a blazing fast 14.4 kbps modem, and I always preferred the Walmart special Zoom Telephonics, or was that Best Buy? Might have been Best Buy. But I would always buy Zoom Telephonics, and they were very reliable and cheaper than the US Robotics, and they worked. I never had a problem with them. So the whole thing, you get what you pay for, didn't apply in this case. Zoom Telephonics modems were awesome. But I upgraded from a 14.4 kbps to a 28.8 kbps, and then eventually to I don't remember if I went to a 33.6 or directly to a 56K, but I went through every iteration. I'm pretty sure I did do 33.6 and then 56K on this computer that can barely process anything. And eventually, modems are useless, so I went ahead and installed a network card for my network. So that is the insides of the case, and that's the large story of this system. Let me pause one more time and put the cover back on. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention the sound card. I originally bought, this was at Walmart, a Logitech Soundman Wave, which I was super impressed with. Really enjoyed it. Had some great software that it came with, something that could read the icons in a computerized voice. I thought that was so advanced for the time back in 93, 94. I just loved it. Right now though, I do have a Creative Labs because I needed the IDE. The Soundman Wave had a SCSI port built in, and I don't have a SCSI CD-ROM drive, and I wanted to get rid of the IDE interface card because I did have this decked out with other cards, and so I was very limited on space. And so I ended up swapping the Soundman Wave with this Creative with the IDE so that I can use the CD-ROM drive. Okay, so here we are. I have the system on. It was on while we were looking at it. I have it running Windows 3.11. I did once upon a time have OS2 Warp 3 on here. When I was playing around operating systems, I did once upon a time install Caldera Linux. I forgot to mention I did upgrade from that 130 meg Connor to an 850 meg Maxtor that I bought at CompUSA. My mom was so disappointed in me to drive me all the way up there 45 minutes away to buy a $300 hard drive that she felt was a waste of money. $300. We grew up poor. That was a lot of money to us. And here I was spending that kind of money on my computer. but I really needed the space for all the stuff I was doing, so I rationalized it and I went ahead and purchased it. And all that extra space allowed me, well, initially I had problems because the BIOS chip couldn't understand drives larger than 504 megs. There was that limitation. So I also had to, well, I initially first used drive overlay software, which I really didn't like the idea of, but I used it for many years before I finally called Unicore software for a BIOS upgrade, and they sent me a BIOS upgraded chip. And that allowed me to get past the 504 meg limitation, but I had to reformat and repartition my computer to actually take advantage of it, which was fine because I was breaking down and rebuilding the system left and right, gave me lots of experience playing around with operating systems. So as I was saying, I had enough space. I even used System Commander on the system to install different operating systems. I at one point had multiple versions of MS-DOS and PC-DOS. I had OS2, I had Linux, I even had Windows 95 on here. Windows 95 ran dog slow. For the RAM, I initially populated those 4 30-pin SIM slots with 4 1 meg chips for an extra 4 megs of RAM, so 6 megs total. I later upgraded that to 4 meg chips because that was the next size up. So that gave me 16 megs of RAM in the 30-pin SIMs plus the 2 meg on a motherboard, gives me a grand total of 18 megabytes of RAM for this particular system. And that was a lot of memory, but the chipset and the memory accesses are so slow. This chipset is a really poor chipset that Windows 95 ran like crap on this particular system. No amount of speed boost from the processor upgrading would help with the very slow memory subsystem that made Windows 95 feel very sluggish. And even my, GUI accelerated Mach 64 card was not all that great. It just didn't help out with the operations. And so I quickly ended up getting rid of Windows 95. I got rid of OS2 because, frankly, whenever it screwed up, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't have access to the internet or forums if my computer was down. This was the only computer I had. And I didn't know about the Alt F1 trick to start in like a safe mode with OS2. So I ended up going back to just straight DOS. But I used this system for many years. You may recognize this system from my recent Dobson Utilities release video. This is the system that I did all my programming on when I was initially writing the Dobson Utilities as batch files and compiling them as batch files. I still use this system for the final testing of the Dobson Utilities. I don't actually write the code on this particular system anymore, but this is my primary test system, and this is also my packaging system. Once I'm ready to release a new version, I do it all on this particular system to make sure everything works on a hardware era-specific machine. So that's this particular system. This is the first computer I ever owned. I spent lots of money upgrading it. It was very fun. I learned a lot about computers during this era. I learned a lot about operating systems. I found it so fascinating, the amount of innovation that was happening in the operating system and application space back in the early 90s. It's what hooked me to the entire industry. It seemed like there was no limit and no bounds, and there was things coming out left and right. Lots of competitors. People starting up with their own ideas and then dying out quickly because their idea wasn't as great as they thought it was. But it was still great because it was people trying to innovate, and I loved it. I just loved the x86 IBM compatible space. Quickly got into the Mac versus PC wars even back then, even before the Mac commercials, the Get a Mac commercials, which I thought were absolutely ridiculous. I've since kind of come to terms and might even want a Mac in my collection, but I want like an early-ish Mac, either from the early 90s or the mid-90s, either or. But that's this system. This is my very first system I bought on my own. I bought the initial system itself for, I believe, $600 or $800. Spent $300 on the hard drive. Spent several $100s on the processor upgrades. I spent even more money. I think it was, when all said and done, with those 4 meg chips, during the mid 90s when there was the SD-RAM, I'm sorry, it wasn't SD-RAM, with the RAM price fixing and colluding between different RAM manufacturers. They were all busted for it by the FTC later. The prices were astronomically high. I think one 4 meg chip was $200. So that was $800 for all 4 meg chips to go into my system. I was just spending so much money on this system at the time. And I had a really fancy NEC 15-inch multi-sync monitor that has since unfortunately died recently. It just died a couple months ago, and I don't have the means to fix it or the skills to fix it myself. But this was my hot rod. This is the system that started it all for me. I still own it. In case it wasn't obvious, I'm skipping around doing very stream of conscious talking here. I also did upgrade the RAM, the SRAM, the cache, the level 2 cache. I did go straight to the maximum. I wanted to go to like 512K. I heard that was a sweet spot, but this particular system could only do 256 kilobytes of L2 cache, so I went with it. I put it in, and I don't know if it's just me, but I barely noticed the speed difference. This system actually benchmarks quite poorly, I might add. I wonder if I can give you a quick demo here. That's not what was supposed to happen. Don't do that. I just locked up my system. Yeah, that's what the reset button's for. So there we are. There's the startup, 256K cache. Nope, let's quickly reboot it one more time. I don't want to do an F8. I want to do an F5 and bypass. So let's bypass the startup files. Let's launch into... Do I even have DOSBench on here? I thought I did. Rather hard to do. Oh, you know what? I didn't put it on, but I did throw in SpeedSys onto this system. I think SpeedSys actually locks up on this system. Let's take a quick look. I think it always locks up at memory type here. Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to show all the fun benchmarks, but this thing benchmarks dog slow. It was not a very fast system that I ended up buying. I would have been better suited waiting a little bit and buying something with Visa Local Bus, but at the time I bought this, I don't think Visa systems were out yet, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But yeah, so let's bring this video to a close with all my stream of conscious talking. Really love this system, learned lots, spent lots, still have it, still love it, still use it on a regular basis for all my code testing on actual hardware. And it's been a great system. I ended up selling it at one point to somebody, but then I ended up buying it back later because I just couldn't let it go. I wanted to keep it, and I've kept it ever since. It's still in my collection. So that's my first computer I ever bought. Let me know if you still own your first computer. Do you still own it? Did you upgrade it? What did you do to it? Like I did. Did you hot rod it like I did? Did you spend lots of more money than you should have like I did? Let me know about it down in the comments. And also, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I really would appreciate that. I've learned that giving it a thumbs down does not tell me that you don't like my content. It doesn't tell me you don't like my video. Giving it a thumbs down merely tells the algorithm that you don't like this type of content. And it'll tell the algorithm to stop recommending this type of content to you. So if you didn't like it, go ahead and downvote it. That's fine. It doesn't hurt me any. And if you want to hear more content, I will. Right now, I'm typically going through all of my museum collection pieces and documenting them in video and talking about them, why each one is specific and important to me to be in my collection. But I also do retro video game playthroughs, even modern video game playthroughs. I would eventually like to get some coding videos up. I want to show my methodology or show me coding very poorly. I'm not a great programmer, but I love it anyways, and I will continue doing it. So if you want to see content like any of that, I'd appreciate a subscription. Maybe you can click on that notification bell and you can get notified when new videos come out. I try to upload at least once a week, depending on my health. Sometimes I'm not able to make it every single time, but in general, I do release new videos every Saturday. So with that being said, I appreciate you and you listening to me ramble on and talk, and thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.